This is just how to do a front wheel bearing on a Honda. This is a 300, but basically all the drum brake style Hondas are the same. So 300, 350, 400, 450, 500 Rubicons, all the way up until they went to the disc brakes are the same style. At least the four-wheel drive models are like this. So to start off with, you need to remove the center nut, remove the brake drum. If your brakes are tight, you may have to loosen off the adjusters through there. If you look at the brake video that shows you how to adjust them, it's the same idea, just have to go looser. Likely if you're changing a wheel bearing, you won't have that problem. You'll probably be doing brakes at the same time because usually they leak and fill up with water. Drum off. From that point, these four fasteners here hold the brake plate onto the steering knuckle, and that's what needs to come off next. Those four fasteners out. This brake plate come off. As you can see, this one's been on for quite a while. Just lightly tap. Oops. Off it comes. You can just twist that and hang it out of the way. Okay. From there on, next thing that needs to come apart, just two fasteners on the ball joints, and then the tie rod end. Okay, all three of them have cotter pins in them. So remove the cotter pins. You're going to loosen this, and then same with these ones. I've already loosened them. If you don't know how to take a cotter pin out, turn around, you're in too deep. Now next thing we have to do is we have to pop the ball joints out of the tapers. There's fancy tools for that, but if you had those, you probably wouldn't be watching these videos. So one of the ways you can do it is with pry bar. I'm going to hook it between the steering knuckle and the A-arm. Okay. And make sure you don't catch the boot in there. I like to thread the nut just on these ones, so if you hit it, you don't wreck the threads. Basically all we're going to do, pry between this and hit right here with the hammer and it'll pop right apart. So try and set this up to show you one. Okay, so I've got this set up so that we can try popping this ball joint. Pry bar again. Usually not on the boot between the knuckle. As you can see, it doesn't just pry apart. Usually a little smack. Some good tension and pop apart. Okay. As you can see, that worked quite well. Basically the same thing for the other side. Or for the upper, I should say. Again, same story, we don't want to wreck the boot. Some tension on there. And pop. There. My stand might not be high enough. That out. That out. Now it's off of your CV axle. So we'll go on how to change the bearing in here next. Another thing I'll mention, if we were going to do CV boot or anything like that, this is basically where we need to go. From here, simply slide in, give the axle a good tug, and it'll pop out of the diff, and you can go on and do a CV boot or whatever else you need to do. The rest of these steps are exactly the same, so I'll go on and then show you how to press out the wheel bearing. First steps of that for changing the wheel bearing is, you need to get the oil seals out. As you can see, this wheel bearing, it's not toast, but it's not great. It's not definitely on its way out. So on the other side, so this is the outer side, the side toward or closest or outside of the vehicle. Same thing, pop that seal with pry bar. Clean this out a little bit so that we can see what we have in here is a snap ring. So go ahead and remove that snap ring next. Okay, snap ring out. If you don't know how to do that, again, maybe you're too deep. But snap ring pliers, squeeze it, pull it out, no big deal. Drop it. Next thing we're going to do is flip the steering knuckle over. I'll show you how to drive it out. Okay, I've got the steering knuckle flipped over. I've actually started driving it out already. This can be done a couple different ways. Of course, you could set it up in a press it out, or you can use a vise and hammer it out. I like to show some of these videos for people doing things at home who may not have all the fancy tools. And if you do things right, you can do it with minimal stuff and still get the job done properly. So just use the big socket and hammer. It's almost out, so we'll knock it the rest of the way out. There we have our socket and old crappy wheel bearing. Okay. So next thing we'll do, clean this all up, make it all pretty, and then we'll press in the new wheel bearing and put the seals in. Okay, so next is installing the new bearing. So here's a new bearing. Again, we could put this in with a press, set it up, see how nice. We're going to do this at home style, so we're just going to use a hammer to drive this one in. It's very important that we're not beating on the inner race. We just want to use the outer race. Now, we can do a lot of different things. We can get a socket that's the perfect size, use that to protect it. We can, and we'll need to do that to seat it all the way in. Or you can just carefully go around the outside edges. Okay, so biggest part of this is we want to keep things nice and straight. And you can see that this isn't a crazy hard press fit. Okay, if things start to go really hard, probably crooked. Okay, so we're basically seated down flush. Obviously it needs to continue going on down, so I'm going to grab a bigger socket and do that. And we'll finish driving it the rest of the way in. Okay, so finish driving the bearing in. Just found the socket that was the perfect fit, so that we're not beating on the inner race. Drove it the rest of the way in. You can see that the groove for the snap ring is now visible. Next step is put in the snap ring. When it comes to snap rings, they're actually made via a stamp. And there's always a sharp side and a rounded side, and what you want is the sharp side against thrust. Okay, so this bearing can't go out that way; it can only go this way. We want the sharp side up. So drop it in the proper way. Oops. See if I can do this one-handed. Nope. Okay. Snap ring installed using two hands. nextly is our seals. As you can see, I've packed the whole back side of the seal with grease as well as the sealing lips. Now this is the side that goes away from the machine to the outside. That's the thinner seal. Now, same thing, we can get that same big socket, drive it in, but again, with a little finesse, you can do a lot without. Maybe not today. At least not one-handed. Let's try that. There we go. Let's get it started. Same thing, just work around it. And that's it, nice and flush. I'll flip it over, do the other side. And what I like to do is, you can see there's a little bit of space in between. I'll generally pack that full of grease as well. Okay. Biggest downside of these things is getting water in and causing failures, so the more help we can give these seals, the longer everything's going to live. Okay guys, so we're ready to go back on. As you can see, I got the steering knuckle already. Everything's packed and loaded with grease. Both seals are in. Greased all up. Cleaned up the end of the CV axle so that it'll have a nice surface to seal up against. And we'll go ahead and install here. So nicely sliding it into the seal there. Put in our ball joints. And from here it's just nuts and bolts going back together. Okay. Tie it right back up. Okay, so I'll tighten everything down and put in the cotter pins. A couple other things to pay attention to are in your brake drum. There are a couple areas. Obviously, this particular machine, I've done a bit of brake work here, so clean those up. You want this seal all cleaned up and greased up. This sealing surface, that's what this seal is going to ride on. Again, if it's all chewed up, it's not going to seal very well. And an often missed one is there's a small seal that seals on the end of the CV axle here. Okay, and that can let water in too, so I want to make sure that everything's all nice, clean, and greased so that it seals up beautifully. Okay, just pull back together here. Everything's torqued up. New cotter pins. Pay attention to this one. Don't let your end be hanging down. Can wreck a CV boot that way. Again, new cotter pins all the way around. Same thing back here on the tie rod end. Lastly, okay, those 4 fasteners back in. Lastly, what we're doing, putting on the brake drum and hub. These you can do separately. The hub is held to the brake drum with these 2 bolts, and there's an O-ring between them. I generally don't see the need to take them apart. Of course, if your brake drum is worn out or something like that, which can happen, then that's obviously how you would do it. So I'll torque this up and go back through. We'll have to adjust the 2 adjusters on the brakes, and we're all back up and running.